Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Crit Academy. I am your host, Justin.
And I am your guest, Austin Brady, and we hope to inspire you with creative content that you can bring to your next adventure.
Every time.
We want to thank you guys for joining us here at Crit Academy Studios, where everything's made up and your roles don't matter.
That's right. Your roles, like the homebrew world, without any homebrew content, don't count.
Yeah, it's not really a homebrew.
It's not
At that
homebrew.
point, it's kind of just like you got a different map, but you're still playing the same thing.
It's like you tried to homebrew, but you other fermented. You fermented somewhere else.
That's good.
That's not brewing at all.
That's really good. So
really good.
I'm really excited for our episode today. Obviously, we have a special guest, Austin Brady from the Homebrew Dungeons and Dragons Sci-Fi podcast. So I'm super excited to talk about that today. But before all that, we have a little bit of housekeeping. First, if you're watching this and you like Dungeons and Dragons and you like superheroes, make sure to check out our Capes and Crooks playtest streams bi-weekly on Fridays. This is our upcoming Kickstarter projects. To sign up for notifications for this project, head on over to our website at critacademy.com/capesandcrooks. If you've been watching it so far, thank you very much. It's going awesome. So much fun. Who knew that D&D could work as a superhero? I bet you our buddies at Homebrew did, because they've made it sci-fi. So I'm really excited to poke his brain about that a little bit. Yes, we did run into a small hiccup with the timing. Kickstarter is forcing us to fulfill all of our backers for Memorable Monsters first, which is good because our layout should be done this weekend. So hopefully that doesn't take more than a couple weeks. So we're really excited for that. In the meantime, that means more playtests, more ideas. Now, moving on. We like to start off every episode by giving away fat loots, don't we?
Absolutely. And right now, our RPG Fat Loot giveaway is Valerie Goodwin's Book of Heart, something very new. Valerie Goodwin's Book of Heart is a collection of good, pure, and optimistic options for players that expand on the D&D core rulebooks and supplements, which is also really great. I like the more optimistic approach for one change. Instead of the, yes, Dark Lich, consume humanity. 10% of all profits will be donated directly to Doctors Without Borders for their continued good outside of the fantasy world. The sourcebook provides a glance at what may be contained within the Book of Exalted Deeds, including virtuous pursuits, subclasses for every class, optional feats, and magic items. Who doesn't love a good magic item? Each subclass in the book is commented on by Valerie herself, highlighting their pure good.
Yes, it's actually really good, and I've said this before, I was very happy to be part of Monsters of the Guild, which also did the same thing. They had Doctors Without Borders donations, so I highly recommend checking this out. You can head on over to critacademy.com/post/episode 218. You can get a link right to the product there. I always support these good causes because I have been on the receiving end of them in need. So make sure if you want to do something good, you can pick up some D&D content and help save the world. Who's our winner today, Austin?
Our winner today is CD... Right, I forget about that. Our winner today is CD Marshall 18.
Woo!
Congratulations. And be sure to tell everyone about that Awesome Proud, because it is actually really cool.
Yes.
But don't worry if you didn't win, to all the rest of you out there. Just head over to critacademy.com and subscribe for your chance to win on the newsletter. We give away fat loots every week, so just do it.
Do it now.
When you're going to win.
So all you got to do is sign up. Because it's a new item, it's 2 new items every week. There's always a chance you'll win more than once. So... All right, that'll do it for the housekeeping. On to our main topic, our wonderful interview with the Homebrew D&D Sci-Fi actual play podcast player. Not the DM, right? Player?
No.
Okay.
I'm a player. I'm a cast member. I'm a voice. Creative director of the podcast.
I like that.
I also do all like the art and design stuff.
Very
on that
cool.
kind of end of things.
Did you do that
well.
logo?
You wear a few hats is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
There are many hats.
Yeah, I did the logo
It's
as
very
well.
Nice. I'm really excited about this. I did get a chance to listen to a few episodes in, and I have to say I love the cast. The storytelling is fantastic, and I love that it's sci-fi. Like, hell yeah!
Sci-fi.
I'm super excited for that. There's a lot of good stuff in this this story, this adventure. You kind of already talked a little bit about yourself. Can you give us a little bit more detail about you specifically, and all the a little more depth about the details that you do and the homebrew? Austin?
Are you referring?
Yeah. So me, Austin James Brady, I play Zaldwin in our first bulk of our arc, and then I also end up playing a character named Mordecai a little bit later on, who's part of a different crew altogether.
I love
so
that.
if you're just starting off and you're scared about Zaldwin, he's still around.
That's funny.
Yeah. And yeah, you said it yourself. Like we're an actual play podcast set in a sci-fi world. A lot of the things that we deal with world-wise are like very gritty, very like people die. There's no plot armor. Everything's pretty rough. I mean, the universe is kind of falling apart. The stars are dying. The entropy is
Very
kind
cool
of
premise. I like that a
taking
lot.
over us. Yeah,
That's cool.
and so it's how do these characters operate in a world that is absolutely falling apart, that is stuck in power struggle between forces on a galactic scale. It's no longer just like continents or warring countries or anything. It's like every planet has those problems. Every planet is going to have some sort of chaos going on it, and we have to somehow figure it out. We're on a path. We don't know where that's leading yet, but we're on it.
That's part of the fun, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, what would you say is your most memorable D&D moment? It could be either in this this that you're playing right now, or it could be just overall as a player. I don't know how long you've been playing, or
Yeah. I've been playing for I want to say over 10 years now.
Okay.
I don't track my player anniversary or anything.
Right.
That needs
I
to be a
think-
thing.
One kind of moment that was like really impactful for me, and it really kind of got me into the idea of like, oh no, I can do anything in this world. Was me and my friends when we first started. I think it was like early college for me, and I was always like huge dork playing like RPG fantasy video games and everything, but college is a great kind of grouping because you get all those people together and you're like, you know what I've always wanted to play? D&D. Let's learn how to do it.
Nice.
And so we were super inexperienced. We assumed that you had to start at first edition, but our first edition ended up being pretty homebrew itself. We broke pretty much all the rules. And one moment that I realized like, oh no, this is a huge sandbox. It doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
Was I was playing a fighter. Fighters don't have any spells. Didn't have any arrows or anything. I was just a big sword boy, and we're fighting 3 things flying around in the air, and I like wasted all of everything just trying to hit these flying things until I realized like, oh, I have a grappling hook, and there's a witch flying around the room, and I use my grappling hook to sink into her, yank her out of the air, and then just punch her to death.
Is it just an Austin thing with grappling
Yeah,
hooks?
it's so funny that you mentioned that because one of
Yeah.
my more fun D&D moments is me just messing around with a grappling hook. It is so funny that you say that. actually.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's so
Great.
fun. It's just,
Yeah.
in the book it says you gain advantage on climbing checks, but it's a grappling hook. What do you
Yeah.
mean? That's all it does.
I'll pick my teeth with it.
Oh, dude, absolutely. Like,
And
Just
I'm
don't
pretty
wipe
sure
with it.
anybody whose mains Scorpion Emerald Combat may have a few ideas too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
Anyway, do you have any moments where
Very
you
good
feel you've failed either as a DM or a player?
I think as a DM, you always feel like you could have done that a little better, or like I feel like I didn't really rule this right. So there's like little stuff, and it's gotta be like water on a duck's back, right? You just gotta let it roll off of you. And but I think when I was really a really young, inexperienced player, I might have taken things a little too seriously for like my table, all right? And I was just like, no, like we gotta figure out this puzzle. Everybody just wanted to drink any pizza and shoot spells, right? And I was just like a little too into it, And since then, I've like realized that like, you can't control everything. You gotta read the table. You gotta be there to have fun, ultimately. And so it's as I've become a much older player, as I've DM'd myself, as all those things kind of come together, it's like you just can't have that amount of control over everything. And I've learned a lot from that. And I like all about reading the table. I play in the homebrew, which is a really gritty story. All of your decisions count. Everybody will remember everything. It's very almost like a telltale game, or whenever we do something fucked up or dumb, it's always like so and so will remember that. It's always
right.
gonna be
Like
there.
it's like
but then I play another campaign with.
Oh, go ahead.
But I play another campaign with my brother where everything's just. It's whatever, dude. I played Gritty, the hockey mascot, the Philadelphia Flyers mascot. I played Gritty as a barbarian. One of our other players was Benjamin Franklin, but he was a walrus. It was just, Outback Steakhouse, no rules, just right. Let's get in there and just do some like really wacky shit. And it's okay if like the weird old man child in the village dies, and it's okay. It doesn't matter.
Wow.
So read the table.
Yeah, for sure. And I see that a lot when I follow a lot of like the newbie areas for D&D, and everyone is always so concerned about, oh, my players did this and I wasn't expecting it, or and they feel like they need to, what could I have done better? I was like, most consensus is just go with it. I mean, and that's obviously what's interesting to your players, and so long as everyone is enjoying it, roll with it.
Mm-hmm. If players blow my mind, I give it to them. I'm just like, I didn't think about that. That's rad as cool. You get inspiration. I'm just gonna roll with it.
Right.
I found it interesting that you mentioned that, like, early on you took it ultra seriously when everybody's laid back. Where for me, I feel like most games I played in are like ultra casual, which I am perfectly okay with. I remember I sat down with two groups where I would make a joke, and they would all look at me. You're speaking out of character.
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Not these groups then. Great.
Yep, time to move on. I've been in those tables where I sat down and within a few minutes I was like, this isn't for me. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye. So we've talked a lot about you and a lot of the cool stuff you've done and that you've learned. Can you tell us about the Homebrew podcast and how it came to be?
Yeah, so I was in my master's degree program, and I had a little bit of extra time. I know you're not supposed to have extra time in an MFA program, but I was like, oh, I'll play around, whatever. And I ended up playing a little bit of D&D with one of my fellow painters, Katie Neese, over at University of Notre Dame. And her partner was actually friends with Grant, who is our DM for the podcast. And I also played with a couple other cast members previously, both Cody and TJ from the Homebrew podcast. And we played that campaign. It ended up being kind of like a short chapter thing. And then Grant, a couple months later, just kind of approached me and he was like, hey, I like your play style. I want you to come to another table that I'm hosting And by the way, I'm recording everything and it's going to be a podcast. I was like, okay, like I listen to a lot of D&D podcasts. I kind of like, I love playing. I love a reason to keep playing and keep to a schedule. And it's just been great ever since. Grant has been a really solid DM, pushing the story forward and
So
also
go ahead.
kind of being the drive behind us getting serious as well.
Yeah.
Pushing you that direction, huh? So
Yeah.
was there any special precaution or processes you guys had to do to set this up? I mean, what kind of can you kind of walk us through the process of development of the podcast aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very beginning, it just started really, really casually. I was using like a really crappy set of headphones. We're just gonna record it. We're gonna put it out into the void. If it catches on, we'll reassess, basically. And so, like, the biggest thing is just doing it and doing
Yeah.
it consistently.
Absolutely.
As long as you're doing it consistency, things will come. And as soon as we started hitting like 300 listeners, 400 listeners, getting around in that kind of area, we're just like, okay, we gotta up it.
Make it
We gotta
better.
buy better mics. We gotta push production quality. We gotta divvy out some jobs here and there. So I started taking on more of the illustration work, some of the graphic design stuff. Our friend Cody, our fellow cast member Cody, started taking on some of the editing, and then eventually all of the editing. And he's been really great, especially like he's tuning in, like I'm tuning in as an artist, really kind of getting a feel for like what the homebrew looks like. He's zooming in on these sounds and really tightening it up. So it's a process like anything else, as long as you're doing it and doing it consistently, people will come to it.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and that's something I've always wanted to do. I mean, because I started this show, we did some small play tests early on where we did just like some good one shots. But by the end of it, with adding the audio and the sound and the music, I'm not doing this again. I was like, it took me. I recorded one long episode. It was like 4 hours long, and I felt like it took me a month to edit it. I was like, I'm done. So I have a newfound appreciation for the amount of work that goes into that.
Yeah, and Grant was DMing and editing, publishing, and doing all of it at the very beginning. And he's just like, I can't keep up with it, because like we all have our jobs,
Right.
Like some of the cast members have children and like real lives and everything that they also have to, do stuff with.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, I've had some of my work that I do for this podcast just get chopped into when they suddenly changed my shift on me, and I had no life afterwards.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Ugh. I think we've all been there on some level.
Oh yeah.
Right,
For sure.
Ian.
All right. What kind of challenges do you run into when you guys develop a sci-fi themed 5e game?
I think the biggest thing is like sometimes things just don't fully translate over, and there has to be some kind of like adjustment to that. We tried for the most part not bringing too much in as far as like, bows do way less damage than laser rifles or anything like that. It's much more like what type of damage they use. So in our world, laser weapons do radiant damage, whereas like energy weapons do necrotic. And there's like little adjustments here and there.
That's cool.
And I think some of the kind of like one of the weirdest kind of conversions was trying to figure out like piloting, like what's your piloting skills? How do you operate spacecraft? How well do you know a shuttle or anything like that? and we kind of just like we're like, well, it's animal handling now. Like we're not really gonna handle a lot of animals in this world, so piloting a skill, piloting a ship, that skill, it's just gonna be animal handling.
Kind of
So,
vibe with that. I like that.
yeah. And the biggest thing is just to like remain loose with the rules, like if something kind of comes up, you talk it through with the players and see if everybody feels comfortable with it, and then you just hammer it down. That's going to be the way that the ruling is from this point forward.
That is now the law.
So let's say, I assume you guys are using the traditional roles, or did you build new classes, or just reflavor the ones that exist already?
So there's some heavy reskinning.
Makes
So
sense.
for instance, one of our players, Tyrell, TJ, who plays Oliver. Oliver is a like I want to say like 16 to 18-year-old like kid who's just been heavily experimented on. He has these giant mechanical robot arms that are like bigger than his body, and he's a pit fighter, right? But
That's cool.
he's on paper he's basically a minotaur. Like
Nice.
that's what he has, and so all of the things, the rushing, the charging, all those abilities, just kind of like translate into him being like a pit fighter.
Makes sense.
And my character is Alduin. I always love playing tieflings. They're super fun. The innate magic is great.
Feel the same way about Asimar's, so I feel you.
Yeah.
I'm the other coin.
They're super fun to play. I love the charisma bonus, all that stuff. And I wanted to design him in a way. I had this idea that there's this luxury cruise ship. It falls into a wormhole. It is gone for 7 years. And meanwhile, the luxury cruise ship is in another time space experiencing thousands and thousands of years passing. And so the onboard AI has to figure out, like, okay, how do I sustain us? And so the AI comes up with like its own religion based off of itself. It slowly teaches people. It has like an online onboard like med bay, and it has to start like tweaking with people's DNA to get them to be able to like take on the radiation, like deep space radiation and stuff. So I
That's cool.
reskinned the tiefling to be what we call a deepling, and it changed, like instead of being having resistance to fire, I have resistance to radiation.
Nice.
Tweaked some of my spells in order to match the theme. Instead of like a normal mouth, he has this large insectoid, crustacean-y kind of mouth thing going.
That sounds cool.
Okay, yeah.
And some of my spells, like my biggest thing is like booming blade. Like it's I use it every time that I go to attack. It's reskinned as like radiation that I'm able to like leak out of vents on my hands, and those imbue my weapons with that radiation power. So
That's cool.
instead of doing the typical thunder damage, it's some form of like nasty radiation damage.
That's really cool.
It
Yeah.
sounds like
Very
it sounds like, as we kind of touched on in numerous episodes too, that you guys do a lot of reflavoring, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know I've seen many games and settings, for example, integrate both like science fiction and fantasy together. Like we see that with like Starfinder, you see that with Warhammer. Shoot, you see it with Star Wars technically. So there's many angles you can go at it with.
Right.
Yeah, for
even
sure.
in Wizards of the Coast like stuff, like even like Ravnica and Eberron, you kind of see that strange mixture of like sci-fi and fantasy. But I really do like the heavy sci-fi take on this one, where
Yeah.
it's not something you see very often, or even like books that are even published. There's not really a lot of like new sci-fi stuff that's really out, and I only know this because I work at Barnes and Noble, so it's
Yeah.
kind of my thing. But it's nice to see this kind of setting being taken I guess, seriously, instead of just having this like fantasy. It's being like accompanied with this fantasy element. It's just a lot more of the sci-fi, which is not something I see very often. So
Yeah,
very cool.
Shadowrun, especially after all the posts I saw yesterday about how yesterday was Goblinization Day. Like in the game setting, like yesterday would have been the date that like a lot of people would have transformed into like orcs, trolls, goblins, what have you. So
Mhm.
yeah,
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. This one, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
This one, like all the various like the Dungeons and Dragons like races, you know, like they all come from different planets, so they're all essentially aliens. You know, like humans are aliens, orcs are aliens, gnomes are aliens. You know, they're all just various types of extraterrestrial being, and that was like a really kind of solid way to cover that kind of spread and that expanse. You know,
Yeah.
there's a gnomish homeworld here, so that was kind of fun to play with.
And those are the sorts of things that I really like, because when I think about that, if you've got a gnomish a homeworld and you go there, everything is designed for people their size. So just as a player that's normal size, imagining the amounts of inconveniences just seems like it would be so much fun to role play out. Like I can imagine we all go to a tavern. I sit down, the table breaks.
Yeah.
You know, little things like that, or you're constantly drinking out of this tiny little, might as well be a shot glass compared to a taller person. So
Yeah.
I like those sorts of things, and I think the team did a good job covering. Hey, you're all just from different planets, and that's why you all look different and have different powers.
The meme where how humans, basically the meme was humans are space orcs. And they basically had the humans from an alien perspective, basically filling all the orc tropes.
Yeah, and they do.
I'm going, did you see what humans did? They found the alpha predators on their planet. And what they do? Keep them as pets.
I guess I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, humans, I guess, kind of would operate a lot like orcs.
We're bad people.
We're not very good people.
We're
Oh,
pretty
look at that
terrible.
spiny lizard thing. He's up too. I want to give up.
So I guess to kind of move it along a little bit here, what makes the Homebrew different from other actual play podcasts?
I think it's the heavy sci-fi flavoring, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
I see a lot of podcasts, and it tends to be pretty light one way or another. And as far as like differentiating from the traditional fantasy genre, I see like Dimension 20 do it, and I really enjoy them, and they're all, production quality is great, and they're fun players and everything. But as far as like really just stripping away, I would say probably 85% of the fantasy and pushing like sci-fi into it, like we have this whole nother world. We're not running by a book, we're not borrowing characters from the typical lore. Like it's all written by Grant. Like the world is written by Grant. We of course like all contribute to that story. We all have the things that we're adding on in layers. It's a very collaborative effort, but I think the sci-fi makes it really built in. Another thing that I think that makes us quite a bit different is that we are veteran players as well. I see a lot of podcasts where it's people who are just starting off and they expect their listeners to kind of learn with them. And we just like come out, Grant knows the rules, if we have like a kind of like question about the rules or anything like that, it's like it lasts maybe 2 seconds and then we move forward. We're veteran players. We know the rules. We try to keep everything kind of rolling pretty quickly, so that like people who are also veteran players can just like click in and they don't have to, sit there
They're
and
not
be like,
taken out of the experience.
yeah, it's like, what do you mean you don't know what this spell does? Like,
right.
Some people might get frustrated with that. I don't particularly get frustrated with that when I'm listening to podcasts, but we know that we can move that forward pretty quickly. And then we also don't really edit that much. Like we put in music, we take out toilet breaks, and that's pretty much it. You know, like so when we say actual play, like you're getting actual play.
Right.
Um,
Do you
Gotcha.
guys have any plans to bring the setting to like a PDF or a book form?
Yeah, Grant is super excited about that. He's like, as we're talking about growing and doing all sorts of stuff, he's like, I want to publish. I want to publish this world out there. I've also been working on this little secret view for all the people listening, but I'm basically working on Homebrew's podcast specific character sheets. So one of the things that Grant does when we're creating our characters is he's like, okay, you're gonna have a major item and you're gonna have a minor item, and the major items are like rule twisting, world break or rule breaking kind of special items that we get that like do awesome stuff, and then we get like a minor item that's like a slight buff. So if you listen to the podcast, Zaldwin has a flying robot that its name is Hermes, and it's his assistant. It may or may not be recording things for the giant AI that runs the luxury ship that he comes from. It may or may not be all sorts of stuff. Some of it I don't even know. Like Grant even gave me the little like precursors. Like you can control Hermes in combat, but I can control him in the story. Like I control the lore, you know, of that thing. So there's even secrets that Hermes has that I don't know. But Hermes is basically like I can tweak him, I can edit him, I can tinker with him, I can give him tools that he can become proficient in. He can cast spells, you know. So there's all this kind of cool stuff that happens with Hermes. He can fly around and like move security cameras if we're trying to sneak somewhere. He can assist me in various ways. He can read data chips that we collect. Anything like that. So
It's a very handy AI.
Right.
yeah, super handy. Especially, you know, in combat when people need assistance. He can record spells, and then he can hold a certain amount of recorded spells. So if he sees it, he can learn it, which has been awesome. Like Shield of Faith has been super helpful when it's casted from a little robot that just flies around
And doesn't take up your concentration.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like Hermes is his own thing. And then my minor item is a sick pair of like energy sabers that I use, that are just basically like +1 short swords, you know, like, but they deal the modified damage type.
Nice. I like that.
Very fun.
Some good stuff there.
Yeah. So I'm designing these like character sheets based off of like back to what I was actually getting to, designing these character sheets to accommodate for that. So on the items page, I have a spot for major items, I have a spot for minor items, and like big areas for descriptions of what they do and stuff like that, and trying to build it towards the play style that we actually use, so that if you do end up, you know, like trying to build this world or use some of the things that we do, you have a character sheet that accommodates for all those weird
Really
funky stuff that we do.
Yeah, I can see where that can set a lot of like interesting roleplay aspects, just with having like a major item that obviously like pertains to the plot in some way, shape, or form. That obviously has story attached to it, which is something that is kind of lacking in a lot of magic items in D&D to begin with, where they kind of just are things, they exist and they help you, but they don't innately have something tied to it. Whereas it sounds like, at least with the AI that you have, it sounds like they at least have like it already came from something that has a certain purpose behind it, and your DM is kind of like, I'm not letting you have full control of this because reasons. And I think because of the fact that there's this interaction between player and DM, it makes this object a lot more important than it already is. So
Yeah. One of our players, Pippin, he plays a wizard named Nivitz. And he's like this huge researcher, has all this like technology. And in our kind of like episode 0, he gets his lab raided by like a shady government thing, right? And so some of the technology that he was still able to like hold on to and retain, we end up seeing versions of that like the like government agents are using. And so
That's cool.
his major item is this like cloner that he's able to like clone himself with. And his clone, it lives for X amount of time, and it can hold concentration for him. It can cast cantrips for him, stuff like that. Like, but we end up like, what other technology from your lab ended up getting raided? And like, oh, we see it here in the world. Like, this bad guy is doing some cloning. Like, what is that? So it's all tied to the story, as well.
That's cool.
Everything's deeply linked in. Like everything that we use is somehow tethered to the world in a very real way.
Nice.
Kind of feel like we touched on this a little bit already. But what is your favorite part of creating the homebrew?
I think this is gonna sound really cheesy, but one of my favorite things in working with the homebrew is like being the hope. My first character, Zaldwin, he comes from a very sterile world. He comes from this ship that everything's been fine. It hasn't been in any wars. Everybody treats each other well on it. And then he's thrown into this terrible world where there's a psychotic space cults and there's like dark government agencies and there's murder all the time. There's planets being exploded all the time. And so
imagine coming out of that is probably a little different.
yeah. And so like kind of showing that though we've been presented with this really dark world, being the light there, I think is really nice. I like playing that type of character. And for contrast, my other character was in the psychotic space cult and is possessed by a lawful good weapon. So
that's awesome.
We're seeing them on their path of redemption on trying to be a good person, post planet destroying antics. Like how do you redeem that? How do you redeem yourself from murdering billions?
I really love that everything seems to be so tied to the story. That's a lot of credit to Grant and the Dungeon Master, because to specifically, it sounds like he goes quite out of his way to ensure that all the characters, all the items, and everything that's happening really has a huge impact on the world around you, which really, as a player, can just make you feel awesome. And that he's really taking all the work you've invested in your characters and doing what he can to bring it to life. And that really is a sign of an amazing Dungeon Master. So.
Yeah. And it's great seeing, sometimes you see a footprint of all of the work that he's doing and you recognize it and you see it, and it brings so many like revelations to you as a player of like, oh, it's been weeks since I even thought about that, and we're seeing the consequences of it now. So many moving parts. Grant is great at recognizing those small moves,
right,
and then having us
Making
actually deal with those consequences. Yeah.
So obviously the work that goes into a actual podcast is pretty huge. For anybody looking to step into that area, do you have any advice to give them?
I mean, I said it earlier, just like consistency. That's always going to be the hardest thing. As long as you're like putting the time and effort into it, somebody's going to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to like what you're doing. And if you're investing in it, it's going to slowly get better at time, better with time. Y'all don't have to be Critical Role on episode 0. You
Preach,
know, like
brother.
you don't have to have that production quality. You don't have to, even know what you're doing. Like do it, do a podcast, try it out. If you realize that you want to cut ties from that project, start another podcast. Like,
Right.
just keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start to find the things that you like. You'll start
Right.
to see the types of behaviors that you like to, replicate in the world. You'll see the types of stories that you want to tell.
Yep. That is that's some pretty awesome
just
advice.
Keep going for it. I mean, I was using like pretty much a $1 microphone, like a $1 headset.
Yeah.
In there.
That I've probably had for years. And we just slowly, leveled up. You're starting at level 0, right? You're starting at, think of the podcast as a character.
That's
Start
awesome.
at level 1. You suck at doing stuff. That's okay.
You'll get there.
You'll get there.
So, for anybody that's interested in checking this out, and as like I said, I've made it through a few episodes and I highly enjoy it. I'm looking forward to finishing it up. In fact, I'll be listening to it when I go to work tomorrow because that's the sort of stuff I do when I'm supposed to be being productive. Where can people find the Homebrew?
Yeah, the Homebrew is on iTunes. The Homebrew is on Spotify. We're everywhere. If you look up the Homebrew, a D&D podcast, we have a website. You can kind of get redirected to all different podcatchers. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. We do all sorts of like little giveaways ourselves. We're always posting art. We're always posting articles. So you can get like general information about D&D stuff as well as like all of our homebrewed content.
Very cool. I honestly, like I said, I've really enjoyed it so far, and after interviewing you, I'm really excited to see what else comes out of this show. So, like I said, I'm super excited. You guys can head on over to critacademy.com/post/episode 218. You can find links directly to their podcatchers there as well. If you're also checking out the UTTs and stuff we have there. I think that'll do it for our main topic. We'll now be moving on to our Unearthed tips and tricks.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, our Unearthed Tips and Tricks segment, where we bring you new and reusable material for both players and DMs.
So, Austin B., you brought with you a character concept today. Would you like to tell our audience about it?
So, like I said, Zeldwin has this small robot named Hermes, and I was, sometimes this comes up, and you hate to think that it would happen, but you got to be prepared afterwards. Which is like, what happens if Zeldwin dies? And so I had kind of come up with this idea that if my character, this bug tiefling alien guy, with this little flying robot, ended up dying on an alien planet, how would Hermes kind of exist from that point? I don't think he would necessarily fall to the ground. So I'd like to introduce Prometheus.
That's a good name.
Who is a void forged sword void forged blade song wizard. And so basically a body falls from a shock shuttle, lands on the planet, opens up, there's just a body without a head. Hermes flies over, logs into it, and he becomes this character that's tasked with taking this incredibly genetically altered being back to the ship. So he straps Hermes he straps Zeldwyn's body onto the back of him, and that's his mission, right? Is to return Zeldwyn's body to the Oasis.
That's a good character concept.
I love
Yes.
it. That's so cool.
See, this is a good character concept because it's a character concept for a character you're already playing. So you're just immediately tying the end that's like, oh, this guy died? Don't worry. There's a plan B already in action. You guys just don't know it yet.
I love it.
What about
So-
head on the meat suit? Got it.
Yeah. So I ended up giving him the just building him up to like a level 7 wizard just to kind of see what would happen. Because I had also never played like a Bladesong caster. Gave him kind of the far traveler background. So
a good one.
everybody's
Okay.
like, what the fuck is this? You know, because it's a robot designed by an AI, so it doesn't look like anything a human would build. And of course, to have the homebrew flavor for it, I gave him a special feat called the Void Design Sniper Body, which Prometheus can reformat their body, separating their legs, and their torso kind of swings back behind their feet, and their head tucks into their body, and their spinal column elongates, and they become a sniper turret. And
It's a damn
Prometheus must take-
transformer.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Prometheus must take 2 actions to assume the sniper body form, and then once in that sniper body form, Prometheus's movement becomes 0 and gains the weapon property and the ranged weapon property. And on each of Prometheus's turns, they can take any spell, transform it into a ranged spell attack with a range of 300 feet and triples the damage. However, they can only do that 3 times per long rest, and they experience 1 point of exhaustion for every spell they cast that way.
Nice.
So it's you unload a ton, and then you're out. Right. I also wanted to kind of design something because on the homebrew we recently had a space battle, and it did not go well for us. We were properly fucked. And so I was like, if Zeldwyn dies, I also want a character that can just like climb on top of the ship, turn into a gun, and start mowing down other like spaceships, basically. Because the rest of the crew is soft, fleshy bodies that can't handle space.
Go ahead.
What a fun character. See, this is you're weirdly like a support character because like
Yes.
you support the characters by here. I am the magic item. Use
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
And it's just like I've never thought of that. I mean, I guess it's not in any like the core rule books or anything like that, so you kind of do have to kind of think on the fly for that one. But in like a sci-fi setting, who's to say that this robot companion of yours doesn't turn into a hyper weapon and just mows down the enemy with you? Like
It reminds me of the old, Ian beat me to it. It reminds me of the old Transformers. Megatron turned into a big giant gun, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is why he
in-
did not take his toy to the airport as a kid. Not joking either.
That's funny.
Yeah, definitely inspired by Transformers,
love
inspired
it.
by Fooly Cooley, the robot
Yes.
from Fooly Cooley.
Kanji.
Inspired a little bit by like Bastion from Overwatch, like just
Yeah.
trying to kind of get this idea of like what's a very unloving, uncaring robot that I can play that is also a giant gun.
Attention, all patrons.
Kind of in the same vein.
Don't be surprised when I make a monster that has this awesome idea because I absolutely am in love with it.
It's a monster that just turns into another gun for a monster.
Yeah, like I envision like having like a gnome who's got this giant monster that fights for him, but then when you weaken him, it transforms and then it turns into a tank, and then the gnome jumps inside of it and starts mowing the players down. Like
That's very
genius.
Cronenberg.
Yes,
Very
dude.
like just a meat machine.
Love it.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's a great character concept.
Thank you.
So I think that'll do it for the character concept.
That's a good one.
I love that. And I have to crop that and put that into some fancy text because that is awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that, Austin B. Our monster variant of the podcast is the Frost Queen, and I think I have her pulled up here so everyone can see her. So this is a very simple build, but I found a really beautiful art piece I wanted to make a monster for. So so we have you're going to start with the stat block of the adult white dragon, but it's going to lose the features of frightful presence, cold breath, blind sight, tail attack, claw attack, wing attack, and becomes large down from huge. So those are all the changes you're going to start with. But of course we got rid of a lot of stuff, so we got to amp it up somewhere, right? So we're going to give it some new features. We're going to give it chilling presence. Frost freezes everything within 100 feet of her. After 3 rounds, non-magical fires up to the size of a campfire are quenched. Water freezes within 1 minute, and spells that protect against cold are subjected to the immediate dispel magic feature with a +9 add a +9 spellcasting ability. That means people that are immune, tough shit. While within 100 feet of her frost aura. We're going to give her what's called Conjured Ice Lance. So it's a melee or ranged attack with +13 to hit, 10-foot reach, or 60 to 90-foot range. She's basically just going to be the chick from Final Fantasy VIII. I forgot her name. The sorceress, Edea. She's going to idiot that up by tossing lances at the players. We're going to give her Chilling Blast, which has a recharge of on a 5 or 6. Frost releases a blast of frigid air in a 90-foot line, not a cone, that is 10 feet wide. Each creature in that line must succeed a DC 19 con save or take 33 60-10 damage, cold damage, and 60-10 piercing damage on a failed save or half as much on a success. Here's where it gets interesting. I gave her some really cool legendary actions.
As you should.
Yeah, that's how I roll, right? She's going to get detect. So Frost makes a wisdom check. That's great for detecting all the little invisible bastards and rogues. We're going to give her, she's going to be able to make a Conjured Ice Lance up to, 3 times because she has 3 legendary actions. And we're going to give her Frigid Nova, which has a cost of 2 action. She releases, Frost releases a swirl of bursting icing wind. Each creature within 10 feet of Frost must succeed a DC 19 con save or take 2d6 plus 6 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. That should be cold damage. I don't know why that says bludgeoning. I should fix that.
I got it.
Fix that for me. Cold damage and is knocked on their butts. Frost can then fly up to half its speed and move. Now, back up to its other core feature that I gave it called the Bloody Nova. When Frost's hit points are reduced in less to half to its max, it can immediately use its Frigid Nova feature regardless if it has a legendary action necessary to do so. Whew, that's a lot. I wanted a big bad boss, so I got one. She is all about letting it go.
I wonder how many times you're gonna use that.
As many times as I can, man. I'm a big fan. Okay. So I'm really excited for this. If you guys are seeing on the screen, you can see the layout that is in the magazine that we release every month. Looks all pretty and shit with lore and everything. I have to ask, right off the top shelf, Austin B, what do you think?
I think she seems very, very fun. Very difficult, especially with that like 90 foot, or what was it? 10-foot wide, 90-foot long chilling blast.
Yes.
Like being able to be a DM and, really poke and harass some healers and stuff staying in the back line, that's going to be really, really fun as a DM and really difficult as a player, especially, if you stay pretty far back, Yep.
I'm a big fan of the line effects just because they have a longer reach. Now, the assumption is you only ever catch like 2, maybe 3 tops in it, unlike a cone that assumes you can get the whole party. But man, they are so nice to have, I think. Which is why I changed it from a cone, because most of the cold abilities are cone effects. I wanted something a little different, very much Hadouken-like with ice. So, yeah.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
She's a beast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really because this still has flight, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is not just some queen who's sitting on a throne. This is a queen who's flying around and, hurling ice beams at you and all that fun stuff. So this is and I do like how it's like kind of feels like a boss monster where it's like, we're on to phase 2 when it just kind of immediately just freezes everything around her in like a 10-foot sphere. So I do like that a lot as well. I think
Yeah.
that really sells. This is the Frost Queen, not because she is royalty, but because she is powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, and you guys should see the lore behind her. I totally dug up the lore from the old Medusa legends, how she was cursed. It was very much like that, but instead of being a hideous thing, she became emotionless, pretty much, and heartless and everything. It's fantastic. So our patrons will
Okay.
love that. So, anything else to add to that? Nope. Oh, also, if you run this, I highly recommend putting it in air with lots of like cover, because the line effect being 10 feet wide can be dangerous if everyone is all melee. So I guess no more dangerous than a cone effect, I guess, if they're all just sitting in front. But anyways, I do recommend cover. That'll do it for our monster variant, the Frost Queen.
Cool. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, Austin A, would you like to tell us about our encounter?
Deep
Yeah.
breath.
I know. I'm like, okay, I see a lot of text, but we got this. It's nothing unusual. This one is called The Shattered Tundra. The characters are hired to seek out Lavinia Brushgather, a spy halfling. She stumbled onto some important information that your benefactor seeks. Your benefactor had hired her to gain knowledge, but had never returned. She instead went into hiding. Your benefactor's contacts believe she is hidden in the Shattered Tundra. The Shattered Tundra is a maze of shifting sheets of ice and glaciers. While mostly abandoned, there are a few frozen islands with tribes of Frostlanders. Use the Berserk stat block for these guys. The Frostlanders are a primitive and brutal bunch. Much like the Tundra they inhabit, the Frostlanders are people of strength and culture. They worship their deity, the aforementioned Frost Queen, a powerful creature that calls the area home. The inhabitants can often be found hunting whales, seals, and walruses in the frigid waters, choosing to live a simple life. Now, the small inhabited islands are surrounded by a massive, thick continent of ice and stone. The area was torn asunder a millennia ago, leaving the area shattered, cracked, and broken. The massive splits create a massive labyrinth surrounding and protecting the Frostlanders from intruders. Only those with guides from the Frostlander tribes can easily navigate the complex icy maze. Without a guide, the characters must make their way through the deadly environment. Now, this encounter is a skill challenge that requires 5 successful skill checks before gaining 3 failures. If the party fails, they gain 1 level of exhaustion and must endure the maze of ice once again. They have to try again. They don't get like you kind of succeed. No, you have to succeed. As a game master, you can choose to include monster encounters here as well, such as Yeti, Polar Bear, or Oozes. The whole idea, I think, is just the idea that this is supposed to be just a very labyrinth kind of area, and you kind of have to succeed before you come out the other end, and you just kind of, oh darn, we came back to the entrance, we got to go again. Once they pass the challenge, they will then need to convince the Frostlanders to allow them inside their town. This requires a successful DC 16 persuasion or deception check. If a character has the background feature false identity, the character can forge a fake identity connecting them to the Frostlanders and allowing entry. Once they meet with Lavinia Brushgather, they learn that their benefactor has been secretly blackmailing powerful noblemen and women to ensure their political rise in their local government. This includes the murder of innocents. The piece of information she gathered was, of course, blackmail material, but when she learned she threatened young triplets, she fled with the information and all the characters' benefactors' leverage. So, pretty big this time around. We did have to kind of cover up some basic stuff like what the setting is, but definitely the Shattered Tundra is not only an environmental challenge. You do kind of get some benefits around that because with the whole fake identity. So we're kind of including some background character backgrounds that don't normally come to play very often. there are some combat encounters should the DM wish. Now, obviously, there is a lot, so they don't have to. But I think the cool thing is definitely the skill challenge in this one.
In my mind, 350 words or so doesn't seem like a lot until I write it out. So there it is. Austin B., what do you think about this?
I really like the kind of like preface of having this benefactor, and like they have information that we need. We need to kind of track that down. I am actually running a campaign set in a like late 1800s New Orleans, which I might kind of like reskin this a little bit
all
too,
yours.
to fit the bayou instead of the frozen wastes.
Nice.
For sure.
Absolutely. I think all kind of like utility is there, right, for pushing story forward, and then there's also the big challenge of fighting a big frost queen.
Yes.
I definitely think we don't really have an encounter here as much as we have a potential 2-3 session outline here.
Okay, so 350 words for an encounter is probably a bit much. I will.
No. I didn't mean it in a bad way.
Oh
I'm
no,
saying-
it sounds great. Yeah.
I
It's
get
not to say
overexcited when I write these.
it's definitely not that it's bad, because like it's obviously like good stuff here, but it's just man, this is like a couple sessions worth rather than just like a simple encounter for players to kind of plug and play.
Right.
Yeah, and also fleshing it out where, like, you know, if you have this kind of like brutal group of people, right, the Frostlanders, you know, how can you build also some intrigue in there? You know, like, are all of them just these kind of like mindless, like, oh, I'm gonna attack you kind of thing, or is there like
More to it.
you know, much more culture in there? Could you like infiltrate and solve that in some way as well?
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I think that'll do it for our encounter of the podcast, the Shattered Tundra. Austin B., would you like to tell us about our magic item today?
Yeah, the magic item today is Cold Snap, which is a whip weapon, graded very rare and requires attunement. Once you attune to this weapon, its once frigid handle feels warm and welcoming to your touch. How romantic. When you hit with an attack using this magic item, the target takes an extra 1d6 cold damage. This frigid whip contains 1d4 plus 1 charges. When you hit a creature that is not immune to cold damage with this weapon, you can expend one of those charges to inflict a biting chill, causing the creature to make a DC 16 Constitution saving throw. On a failure, the target is restrained until the start of your next turn. On a success, its speed is halved instead. This item regains 1d4 expended charges at dawn.
Okay.
What do you think, Austin B.?
Super fun weapon. I love the idea that, like, even if you don't restrain the target, their speed is halved. I think that even though that seems really little, you know, it's just the last like 7 words of the description. I think that can even be super, super helpful. I imagine playing this with like a swashbuckler character where you can like run up, hit him real quick, pull back, and then like even if they do try to approach you, you know, you're always going to have double that kind of interaction with them.
Absolutely.
I like how you, no matter what, you feel the benefit of the weapon, whether or not they succeed or fail. It's just how much does the weapon hurt them instead. And I think that plays a lot into like the reward for getting the weapon. So it's not all or nothing. It's something or a lot more.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like that's missing from a lot of, you know, magic items. Sometimes when they're built, it's like, oh, you have this legendary sword, and like you just biff it, and nothing happens, you know.
Yep.
But like this is really nice, where like there's an exchange either way.
Yes.
Absolutely. Ian, do you have anything?
I definitely think it was keeping on with the cold theme here. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah. You'd almost say it's really
As we were kind of
ice.
saying before too, though, you didn't really see too many cold-related items, so it's kind of nice to see more in that regard. So that's a win in my opinion.
And
And the restrained effect definitely stays on brand. So
It does.
I took some of the concepts from the old 4th edition books. They have a lot of effects that can happen even on a successful save. And I think, as Austin B already pointed out, that's something that is kind of missing, which is also why I had a hard time determining the rarity of this. Damage wise, it matches up to like the Frost brand or whatever, but its extra utility puts it just above that. And it was tough, but I think that the fact that it does something regardless if it's a successful save or not, ended up forcing me to push it over the top there. So
Makes sense.
I think that'll do it for our magic item.
and now for a DN tip, changing up the setting genre. As you can tell with our main topic, while it does come with its challenges, don't be afraid to dip your toes into other genres outside fantasy. Developing your own creations, which may take more work, it's a very doable thing to do in the 5e rule set. A firebolt can become a laser gun if you just change the damage type to radiant, for example. Futuristic hacking can be reflavored these tools. Looking for an alien race as the main villains for a level 1 intro campaign? Well, the little green aliens could be goblins. Yeah.
Could see that.
Indeed. And the rules of floating in space, just look at the actual plane for mechanical details. And if you want a survival horror style campaign to take place on a ship, much like Alien, you can toss a reflavored aim keg with the acid spray and some intellect devourers against a group of level 1 players to get a terrifying adventure going. All this can take place on a single space station. Deep Space Nine. Haha. Got sneak a Star Trek reference in there.
Nice.
And some simple adjustments to descriptions can allow you to easily reflavor the 5e mechanics to take your game to the stars.
I just thought about how, like, to create a horror campaign, you kind of have to put your players at level 1, or else they're just not going to feel fear. And that makes so much sense. I don't know how that never clicked to me before until just now. Because if you're like level 10, like, God doesn't scare you anymore. Like,
They do
you
feel
kinda
awesome.
just look at him.
What do you think, Austin B?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a fan. It may be kind of like, I don't know how much cred I'll lose for saying this, but I don't think I've ever played a campaign from a book. I mean, I think the closest that I got was like played Eberron for probably like a handful of weeks, and then, you know, parties dissolve, whatever.
Right.
But like, as far as like playing to a written campaign, when you have the rule set in front of you and you can just like expand out and do whatever you want within the rule set, you know, like the possibilities are endless. You know, like, I think having these stories that react to your players, you know, that is super rewarding. Seeing the look in your players' eyes when, like, you know, their backstory is directly tied in with the main core of the story, you know, when you build a story around your players.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I love this.
Very cool.
My bread and butter.
Yeah.
That'll do it for our Dungeon Master tip. Change up the setting genre. Our player tip of the podcast is don't be a dick. And you can avoid dickitude by separating the enemy. In Unity, there is strength, and this applies to your enemies as much as it does yourselves. In many instances, a group of monsters is more than a match for your party, although each individual monster is relatively weak. In such a case, a good tactic is to separate the enemy, drawing them out so that you can engage them individually in smaller groups. there are a lot of different ways to do this when it comes to separating your enemies. One of my favorites, and honestly one of the most common, is utilizing the restriction of moving through a hostile space in like a small hallway, right?
Hallway fighting.
By forcing them to follow you down a hallway, you instantly put them perfect line. A, to only fight one-on-one, or B, use a line attack such as lightning bolt or something. Because not only are you pulling them away from the rest of the group, you're lining them up for your own attacks, and you're reducing the incoming damage that comes in onto your party as a whole. The only thing I always say is better than any cleric is just avoiding the damage altogether, and you can do that by making it so they just can't attack you by keeping them separated. Shutting a door behind them and then going out the other end and shutting that door and barring it and locking them in there while you deal with the other enemies. Players have so many powers and features that can let them manipulate the enemies and maneuver them into a position where they can't gain the upper hand, but they so often just don't. And I don't know why. Austin B, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm a huge fan of like looking at like old school castle design.
Nice.
I know this is kind of like I'm gonna like do a little art history architecture nerd out thing. But like the way that you can, if people are trying to siege your castle, or if you're trying to siege a castle, building that design into it where, you know, like, oh, your shield arm is your left arm, and so this curve in the path is going to force you to turn left, so that your shield, you have to like twist around to the side to use your shield, or like different ways that castle design was used towards fighting and being able to defend and use the architecture in a way that benefits you, or deters enemies, like is always amazing. So like being able to separate enemies, using the architecture around you to split up forces, or like you guys were saying, like bottlenecking people into one area. I always grant inspiration for people who are like using the architecture to their advantage, because I just think it's so cool.
That's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind as a dungeon master. When the players do decide, oh, there's another level, I'm going to climb up to the balcony to get the high ground. That's using stuff you put there, and that should be rewarded in any way possible. So even if it's just like cover or an inspiration point. So
Yeah.
Anybody else got anything?
I can think of a long list of stuff.
Well, one will do.
Oh, magic, obviously. Stuff that can manipulate the environment, like the various wall spells, conjuration spells, summoning spells. Like, oh, you're in the narrow tunnel, kind of like what you're saying? I summon when the creature is big as a tunnel.
That's a good point.
I like that.
Yeah.
What about
Fork it up?
Yeah, just yes, this tunnel. I summon a shark to fill this tunnel as I use shape water and make more water.
Oh my gosh.
And just
How have I never thought of that?
Water and then throw a shark in it and watch them scream.
Where'd our druid go?
Awesome.
That's good.
Anything else? Austin A?
See, I remember when it came to like separating the enemy, when I was using good old Raven the Crow and having the old grappling hook because I needed the grappling hook for various situations. It was always just because we had to run from all these things, because we eventually got found out we're inside, the ship where Zariel was. We're like, not the greatest idea. We need to run. So we, instead of, just kind of, taking this like elevator, we kind of went through like the pseudo waste chute. Kinda. Except waste was more like throwing bodies down and not necessarily actual waste. But I just remember, like, we really did just kind of just went through a bunch of doors, just slammed them behind us, and kept on going, and just went up as many floors as we could.
Trying to
And
get away.
we got pretty far, you know.
Yeah.
It was nice.
You guys-
I just flashed back to the first edition of Pathfinder where I ran a summoner where you build your summon from scratch like a character.
That sounds awesome.
We
That's actually
came
so cool.
to like a room that had like 4 high-level elemental creatures. I looked at the fire and went, I got that one. Summoned my creature, which was basically a lava golem with wings, who was immune to fire. Tackled the fire elemental and flew out the room. It's like, all right, he's taken care of for now.
That's awesome. I love that. It's a really good example. I think there's lots of different ways to separate the enemy, but as a player,
For
just
sure.
keep it in mind because sometimes you have to. It just makes the world, the adventure easier, especially when you're like me and don't afford the players a lot of short rests. So
Yeah.
that'll do it for our player tip of the podcast. Don't be a dick. And you can avoid dickitude by separating your enemies. Now, before we close out, we have another gift to give away. Compliments of... I didn't put his name here. Shame's on me. Compliments of our sponsor.
The Tournament of Tokens. For years, the town of Brightbank has held an annual tournament open to the bravest and the brightest. The premise was simple. Enter the dungeon and emerge with the most chips of valor at the greatest speed. Players would be granted magical items as well as a bounty of gold. With a chance of death, most definitely a guarantee of danger. Does your party have what it takes to become superiors?
Ooh, I like
And
that.
our winner today is Memeness88.
Woo! Yay!
Hooray.
Congratulations.
To win? Not a problem. Head over to craighammy.com, and not only can you subscribe for your chance to win, but you can take a look at our free stuff that we're constantly giving away from our sponsors.
Absolutely. Before we close out here, I just want to say thank you so much to Austin B for joining us. We hope you
Thanks for
enjoyed.
having me.
We hope you enjoyed your experience here at the Crit Academy.
Absolutely.
Do you want to give yourself one more plug where people can find you and all that jazz?
Yes, we are the Homebrew D&D. If you Google Homebrew D&D podcast, we should come up. You can find us at thehomebrewpodcast.com, and you can find us on Spotify, iTunes. Please follow us on Instagram. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow us on Twitter. You know, like we're in all the areas. We're constantly releasing stuff. Our schedule is usually releasing episodes every 2 weeks, but there's plenty of content on there to keep you occupied in the meantime. You can listen, you can follow, you can support, and you know what? Even if you like it, shoot us a contact, shoot us a message. We're always checking our stuff. There's a lot of us. There's 5 of us. So one of us is usually online. We'll chat you up. We'll talk about stuff. And I look forward to hearing from y'all.
For sure.
Nice.
Well, once again, thank you for joining us. I had a blast. You have a lot of... I'm really excited because this episode really rang true a lot for what we've done with Capes and Crooks, which is a superhero RPG. So it shows that it is so versatile that you really can run any genre a game you want using the 5e rule sets, and you don't even have to change that much usually. So... if you please join us on our next episode. We'll be discussing Monster Tactics Hags. We have not done a Monster Tactics episode since the zombie, like in the early 60 episodes or whatever. We will be having a special guest, Anthony Thomas, the creator of the popular Sages of the Forgotten Realms community. I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite groups because all they talk about is Forgotten Realms lore and story. And along with that comes monsters. So we're going to learn all about hags, history, lore, how they birth, all that stuff, and how to get the most out of them mechanically as a DM to piss off each and every one of your players. Yeah, because that's how I roll. If you enjoy the show and you would like to support us, you can head on over to critacademy.com, follow us on social media. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Even if you don't use iTunes, it's free to sign up, and it goes a long way in the podcatcher algorithms and everything. So please do that. We just released our recent product, Whitaker's Well of Wondrous Items. It is selling like hotcakes, so keep an eye out for a print copy, as I am working on trying to get those published too. So if you want something in your hands, you'll be able to do that. With that, I am your host, Justin.
And I am your guest, Austin Brady, and thank you for listening.
Keep your blades sharp and spells prepared, heroes. Thank you guys for all joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks.